I got an A-star in A-level third maths self-studying, and this is how I did it. So yeah, I ended up with a 93% average. I did the Edexcel exam board, and I did further Pure 1 and further Pure 2. I sat it in May, June of 2025. So no, that's a whole year ago. But yeah, university's been bad. Computer science is hard, okay. So just for context, I had 3 A-stars and 1 A with the A in biology. For context. Just for context, okay. I'm not trying to flex, okay. It's just for context. Guys, and for my flashcards, I use Anki. I don't think there's any other flashcard app that even comes close to Anki. Quizlet, you have to pay for it for like £10 a month or something. Also, it doesn't have spaced repetition in the free version, so that's pretty useless. Anki's got the best algorithms for spaced repetitions. And there's like a very good plugin ecosystem for Anki as well. There's a plugin for basically anything. I used Anki, I had around 1200 flashcards, and yeah, I found it super useful. So on the days where I didn't really feel like sitting down and studying further maths, I was just doing flashcards. So I hope you remember those things that like you easily forget to do, like those specific tiny parts of the question, which will lose you like 3 marks or something. But with Anki, you can remember all these different, whereas like something very specific you need to say or something very specific you need to do in the question, but you just forgot. And now you can't like finish a question off pretty much. Here are my top 3 tips for making Anki flashcards. When you make your own flashcards, you can make them specific to you, right? You know what particular part of a question you're struggling on or a particular concept or topic. You can add as many flashcards as you like for that topic. I just think it's better to make your own flashcards personally. I've got a link up here for 20 rules for formulating knowledge. And the main point there is just to keep it short and keep it simple. So like have maybe 1 to 2 bullet points on the back of the flashcard. Nothing too dense, nothing too long. Otherwise, it'll just take too long to recall and make doing lots of flashcards like a slog, like hard work, all right? So yeah, I think sometimes it's okay to have flashcards that are a bit longer, right? But after a while, after maybe it's a 3-month interval, you start messing up some of the words or you're not sure it's right or wrong. So I think it's best to keep the flashcards like atomic so you know whether you got it right or wrong. And then you can review them like super quickly. So I know it's super easy when you're like first Anki to just like say plus 30 new cards or something. But then in a week's time, you have like 100 reviews and like you just don't have any energy to do them. Then you end up skipping your reviews and then end up being a backlog and yada yada. So I would say for the first few weeks, keep the number of new cards like quite low. So I'd say maybe 5 to 7 new cards a day. Even that's quite a lot if you just like an Anki. And then just keep it consistent. Bro, fire alarm, bro. Scared the life out of me. I reviewed every day. Then let's go to the stats for maths. So yeah, I pick up around December time. And then from January to, I think that's the very last day, I'm pretty much doing maths flashcards every single day. So it's quite consistent with that. And yeah, here's some of the other stats if you want to see them. So yeah, there we go. Then let me go through some example questions. This is one of those loci questions, right? Sometimes when you have a particular question, there's a particular step which when you don't get it makes the question super hard, but once you get it, you can like keep using it for future questions like this. So this is one of those examples, right? There's the answer. Once you understand a crux move of a question or a little part of a question that is easy to forget, but you want to remember it, you can just put it directly into Anki as I've done here. Yep, this is image occlusion. So you have to guess what is under the red box and reveal. Yep, and you can toggle the other ones with this. Another question. Okay, makes sense. You can just copy in exam questions as well into Anki and like ask for a specific part of that question that you know you struggle with. So I think this is fairly pure 2, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, and then things to think about. So yeah, this is quite specific to me. So whenever I do a question with a form like this, there are certain things that I would get wrong, like forgetting to put 1 over square root b at the front of the equation as well. And here's another question. Yeah, so you can use, I think it was Mirror Whiteboard. So you can scribble what you want in Mirror Whiteboard, screenshot it, then place it directly into the Anki editor. That's quite fast. Yep, another image occlusion. This flashcard right here kind of breaks the rule a bit, because there's 4 things you need to remember here. So instead of just adding this flashcard, I added this closed flashcard as well. And then I've made 5 cards from this, as you can see. So if I've got this card and this card isn't as bad anymore. because I've broken it down more in this card. So this card isn't the greatest, but this card kind of prevents it from being like a super bad card, if that makes sense. So here's my retrospective revision timetable. So it looks quite complex, so let me just break it down. So here's just general information right here. And then I've listed all the topics along the side here that I've covered. And then first column, this is TL Maths. So this is for his videos, right? So when I was working through his videos on a particular topic, I would just shift this from not started to in progress. Then when I'd finished, I'd move that to complete. We go on to the textbook questions. Yeah, these are just keeping track of the number of textbook questions I did. It did kind of motivate me to like push harder and do more questions pretty much. And then here is Madasmaths questions. It's a total. So it's just a calculation of this, and this. Yeah, that's right. It's just the sum of this, and this. So I track the 3-star and below questions in general, then a separate column for 4-star questions and 5-star questions. And then here is the hours column. So I try roughly to keep track of how many hours I put per topic. These hours do seem quite low, right? But I don't think I tracked every single hour because I think you're supposed to have, I think it's 300 hours for an A level. And here I probably only get like 200 hours, maybe 240 hours. So it is quite low. So here I just tracked every past paper I did. I'd put in the date I did it, and the color represents how hard I found it. So red was like super hard and green was like it's calm. I got a good score on that paper. So I've got here the score I got on the paper, the mark, the grade, and then topics I need to look at, and also questions I want to come back to. So whenever I would do a past paper and get questions wrong, I would track which question I got wrong so I could come back to it. So pretty much by the time I got to my exams, I think I answered every single question right in all of the A-level past papers. I tried out 5 AS level papers, but I don't think I had time to do them all. And I think the A-level papers were like a lot more useful. So yep, a list of questions I got wrong, and the slash represents that I've gone back and got the question right again. Same thing here, list of topics I'd like to work on, and then questions that I got wrong, and the slash represents I've gone back and got the question right now. As you can see, I've got some links here at the top. This is directly to my retrospective revision timetable. This is a spec, formula booklet, a manual, not sure why that's there, and some other random links. So whenever I'd get to a specific topic that I didn't really understand or anything, I just put it down here. And I use this mostly towards exam time, I'm pretty sure. So in the final few months leading up to it, I just place them here. Then when I'm revising, I know which topics I specifically want to look at. So these are like general tips that I would think of whenever I was doing past paper questions or just questions in general. And yeah, this part is quite important. It's just a list of questions I got wrong and I wanted to come back to. So I would screenshot it and then maybe with a mark scheme as well and paste it here so I could try the question in a few days or a few weeks time. I've got a few pointers on each topic. So whenever I make a mistake or have an insight, I just note it down here. Yeah, so the main idea with this was to make sure that I didn't repeat silly mistakes again and again and again. So I'd note them down, and whenever I do a past paper, I'd make sure to read through this first. And then that will help me during the past papers to start making the same mistakes over and over again. I think Madasmaths is the best website for A-level further maths. So I'm just going to show you how we can download all the PDFs and use those. We go to further topic. And let me just pick integration for now. You get this plugin called Down Them All. So it pretty much allows you to download all the links on the page, right? And yeah, here it is. I've already got it, so I don't need to do that. But we simply just go to the plugin and then click Down Them All. And then we switch only to documents or PDFs and click download. And now we just go to our downloads and select all of the PDFs we just downloaded, and then we put them in any folder we want. Let's say I'm working through some of the questions and then I say I complete this question, then I'll just choose the PDF editor and then just cross off the question, like that. I'd add to my spreadsheet. I did 2 4-stars, let's go add 3, and then yeah, that updates automatically, and you can see this total goes up as well. So and I can also increase the number of hours as well. And then when I finish with my session, I'd simply go to save, then I'd save here and overwrite. And if there's a question I'm particularly struggling on, question 6, I can just circle it, save, and come back to it later on. And that's a pretty good way to track which questions you've done and which questions you want to come back to. So here are a few of the notes I did take. Well, this is the one I actually took, right? The other ones are like just replicas. And I'd probably put them on screen somewhere, I think. If it's a particularly difficult type of question, I'd write it out neatly on a sheet of paper. Then once I've written out the question and the answer, I'd go over in red pen and annotate any thoughts I had about the questions. I would note down any mistakes I might make, any particularly interesting steps, which are like crux moves, if that makes sense. So yeah, in total, I think I might have had maybe 20 pages of notes of like work through questions, bring them out on paper. And then, yeah, whenever I'd be struggling with a question, I might check one of these out and try the question again. So yeah, I found these quite useful. You might want to try it out. Yeah. Man, it's hot. It's hot, bro. Oh yeah, those are the only notes that I really needed to take. I think I did most of them like quite close. I think maybe within 2 months of the actual exams. I think. Don't quote me on this. I think. And yeah, always under time conditions for the majority. Then in like the silent section of the library, I'd do the paper. Then I'd go up and mark the paper. And then I would update the retrospective revision timetable or whatever. You can also copy parts of past papers into Anki as well, which is quite useful. So yeah, it all links together pretty much. Obsidian to Anki to the tracker, it all links together. On to the next section. I would say I'm quite good at maths, right? But I'm not cracked. So in year 13, it was the senior maths challenge, and I spent like at least 3 weeks revising for it, but I only ended up with a silver. So I know that's quite good, right? But like there's lots of guys who just end up in like the Olympiad and stuff like that without revising too much. You kind of see which level I am at. You could be best, you could be worse, but then my techniques are specifically for people who aren't like cracked at maths. Because I know there's guys who can just look at a question, solve it. They can see the technique once and then just solve all the questions. They can go to A-level maths without revising and just get an A star because they're just naturally very good at maths. I wouldn't say that's me because I did revise properly for all my A levels, like over like multiple weeks. My strategy is quite rigorous, I'd say. So there's lots of like moving parts, right? It requires a bit of like motivation, discipline to stick with it. So I'd say take the things that you find useful and then leave everything else. I actually decided on doing computer science at university quite late. So I think it was like around middle of year 13. And by that point, I was already like basically finished with my A levels, which are maths, biology, chemistry, and computer science. And for the more competitive universities, obviously you need further maths. Physics is helpful, but obviously I'm not going to do physics and further maths in a gap year. So yeah, that's pretty much. I didn't apply UCAS year 13. I took a gap year and then I started studying further maths alone. I'll show you what I think the breakdown was, but I think I spent maybe around 360 hours in total studying further maths. So considering an A level is 300 hours and then you got 60 plus hours of revision, I don't think that's too much. I'm not sure how much I spent for each of my A levels, but I feel like it was definitely more than 400 hours for each, including class time. A levels were spread out over 2 years. Then you had homework, exams to revise for, and just BS. So just doing A level. So I must have spent at least 600 hours or something on each A level. And I think when you're self-studying, it's like there's a lot of fluff you can cut out when you're studying because often when you go to class, there's like 15 minutes spent just chatting to your friends and stuff like that. I'm not saying that's useless. I think that's part of being in sixth form, right? But with self-studying, there's a lot of like extra time that just isn't used for like talking to friends or like doing challenges in class and stuff like that. That's why I spent a bit less time than the average person. For me personally, I think studying further maths in my gap year worked out, and because I'm here now. And it probably would help anyway, even if you're not self-studying. So yeah, take what you want from this video. Bro, I'm roasting, I can't lie, bro. It's hot as hell. Studying further maths wasn't as difficult as I thought originally. I think the key thing was just staying consistent, watching the videos, and then just doing hard questions pretty much. And then reviewing those hard questions and keeping track of the mistakes you make. So as long as you do that, you should be alright. Maybe an A star. I don't know. I could have talked about other things like how I use my calculator, maybe the Pomodoro technique, or where I studied and stuff. But I feel like I covered like the meat of what I did, the 80 of the 80-20. Wait, no, the 20 of the 80. So, yeah, that's the end of the video. If you're interested in being tutored by me, I have my Super Prof linked down below. And yeah, check it out and see we're down for some tutoring. And yeah, I might have some other links, maybe like templates of like the revision timetable I use, or maybe Obsidian. I'm not actually sure at this point, but you know, whatever. Hopefully you enjoyed and see you around.